All right, welcome to episode number 8 of the Jake Blanchard podcast. Today, I'm excited to have my friend Duree Westover on the podcast. Duree is the managing principal at Experis for the Pacific Northwest. She'll explain to us a little bit more about what that means. She's a fellow Arizona State Sun Devil, just like me. We actually were connected through a mutual friend, Jeff Foster, in the ASU Alumni Network. And she also sits on the Idaho Technology Council. She's on the board for Girls on the Run and recently a board member of the Boise Valley Economic Partnership. Duree, thank you for being on the Jake Blanchard podcast today.
Thrilled, Jake. So fun to see you. And this was Fear the Fork for those that don't know.
Absolutely. Fear the Fork. Hey, we've known each other for a few years. I just announced that, obviously you're the managing principal there at Experis for the Pacific Northwest. Let's unpack what that means. Just give folks context of who Experis is, and then what is that geographic territory for the Pacific Northwest, and then what services do you provide to organizations?
Sure, happy to. So a lot of people know our parent company more than they may know the Experis brand, which is Manpower Group, publicly held company. We've been around about 70 years, Jake, publicly traded, as I mentioned. Worldwide headquarters are in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. A little commercial for it. It's 31,000 employees. We're in 80 countries, and we deliver everything in workforce solutions. Our company, Experis, which is a brand of Manpower Group, really focuses in the IT space. So we help solve clients' issues as it relates to technology by either bringing them the right skill sets at the right time, so bringing talent to them to get the projects done, or many times our clients will like what we bring to them and our quality and staffing of our talent, and they'll ask us to take over outcome-based work, such as developing applications for them. I happen to manage PAC Northwest, which is a great territory to manage. Incredible teams and incredible tech vibes going on and growth in all those states. So I've got Portland, I've got Seattle, I live in Boise, and I run the Boise Treasure Valley market, as well as Salt Lake, and then we do the great state of Montana and the Dakotas. So a lot of great activity and big turf and really good teams.
That's a lot that's going on. That's a pretty good sized territory as well as far as the Pacific Northwest goes. And then what kind of roles and resources are you staffing in those different areas and types of organizations that work with Experis?
Yeah, great question. So we do a lot in the SDLC, software development lifecycle space of developers, project managers, DevOps, principal engineers, business analysts. We do a lot of data scientists. We do RPA. Robotics is very popular right now, and talent's very hard to find. So a lot of across the scope of anything in IT. Even we're doing a lot of help desk right now because a lot of people are dispersed right across the globe because of COVID. We've got a lot of demand for remote support for a lot of our clients. So everything in the IT space we support.
Well, and how did you get into you've been in the IT space for a while, right? I mean, this has been.
I have.
So how did you get into the IT space and kind of take us on that career trajectory? What interests you about it? Like what were some of maybe the catalysts that nudged you in that direction? I'm super interested to hear this.
Yeah, so Jake, I as we talked, I went to Arizona State. I've always had a natural inclination to lean towards sales. I grew up with quite a badass mom who kind of broke the glass ceiling really early in the 70s. She's my hero. She, kicked the doors open and started her own company in the 70s in a real male-dominated community. And of course, back then it wasn't always common. She, taught me work hard, be dedicated, and would say to me often, a girl can do anything a guy can do and many times better. And that was kind of a mantra. So, I ended up going to Arizona State, got a degree in the communication marketing area. And that was a natural role to get into sales. So I started out in print media. I think you might remember a rag called New Times. It's a lot like the Boise Weekly. Had to hustle, had to sell. Moved into the hospitality space for a while and really looked at a fork in the road, probably in early 2000, and said, late 90s, early 2000, and said, what is emerging? Where do I want to spend my career? Where can I catch the wave? And I was blessed, and I jumped into IT. And I worked for a company out of Tempe, Arizona called MicroAge, which some people listening may remember. It ended up being a $5 billion public company. And was there in the dot bomb. I was there in the Y2K, got to see it all and watched emerging technology just roll. So that's how I got in. And I've been in individual contributor roles, managing national accounts, for years. I moved into sales management about 10 years ago, and I've been in more of a general manager role now, where I'm responsible for the entire P&L for different businesses across the Pac Northwest.
Okay, so once again, I'm interested. You had this mantra early on, in your progression. Have you kept that mantra, that same mantra? Do you reflect on that quite often, especially as you've gone into technology, which, arguably, once again, is a fairly male-dominated industry, or at least historically has been up until, maybe recent times?
Yeah, Jake, I think when I look back at my path and who influenced me the most, it was my mom. She was a realtor, opened up a company, had 25 sales people working for her in the 70s. It was a big deal in town, in my little Arizona town. I had the billboards around town. But when I was a little tiny kid, she would tell me to come to her listing appointments and said, if you sit quietly and you pay attention, if I get this listing, I'm going to give you a piece of the commission. That was like when I was 4, 5, 6. So I'd sit there with my hands folded on my lap and paid right attention. And I think through osmosis, learned the sales process and learned what hard work was. Because this was a single, she wasn't a single mom. Wasn't a single mom, but she was, my dad worked a lot out of town, like fathers did in those days. And so she had 3 kids, and we're all active in sports. And that was kind of the thing that she taught us, is work hard and do the best you can. It was a gender-free family. My parents did not treat me any differently than my 2 older brothers. We had to mow the yard. I had to mow the yard. We had to pick rocks up and move them across for, landscaping. I was right out there with them. So she taught me that, get out there and get it done. And, IT, especially in the early 90s and 2000s, was super male-dominated. And now, with diversity, equity, and inclusion, we're seeing a lot more opportunities for women in leadership, and we're seeing a lot more opportunities in general. But I think that, helped me pioneer, watching my mom pioneer through a lot of different challenges, right? Just at the time.
Absolutely. And so you've been in this industry for quite a while. You've seen the peaks and the valleys. You touched on Y2K a little bit earlier. We were here in 2007 through 2009 or 10, economic downturn about a decade ago. We're seeing what's happening right now with COVID and kind of the, negative externalities of just having to close down business and commerce kind of slowing down a little bit. What have you learned through those different peaks and valleys, and, what's your mindset like going into something like COVID 6 months ago?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. And, I've got some Gen X's that work for me, and they have never gone through anything, right? This is their first big issue, life issue, work issue, right? Pandemic, huge for all of us. But, you're thinking of all those things you described, and then you layer in different things like 9/11 and all that. And, I'm old enough, I've lived through a lot of it. And I would say resiliency. I had somebody come talk to my team about resiliency. She said it's life's shock absorber. You have to have challenges in your life for your resiliency to actually develop. So, if life was smooth sailing and rainbows and unicorns, you would never get through it. But you have issues that you've got to get over, challenges you've got to pivot on, and that's when resiliency happens. I think I learned that, continue to have your plan. You may need to pivot. Your endpoint may be the same place, but you may get there differently. And that's what you need to do, is be resilient. It's a muscle you can develop. It's like, your biceps. You don't just look at them and hope they get there. You got to go do the work to get them there. So,
Oh,
uh,
absolutely. So, I love that sentiment that, resiliency is the shock absorber of life. I also kind of appreciate I guess it would be stepping back and saying like, hey, this is also an opportunity for me. I had a guest on the podcast, John Vandergeesen, the other day. He was talking about a bias that he had in his mind when he was asked to go on a walking safari. He just immediately was producing the answer no. He was just saying, no, I don't think I'm going to go. I think it's the timing, the money, this and that. But he asked the question differently, or he looked at the problem differently. And then he found all these opportunities to say yes. I imagine through this process, your team might be looking and seeing some of these opportunities that are there, as opposed to saying, well, these are the times that we're in and it's just happening to us and we have no control over what's going on. So what's that been like? And what are you starting to see in the market as a result of that perspective?
yeah. I think that's a really interesting way to look at things. And what we have seen, which has been the greatest proof of concept or science project here in the Treasure Valley, is we've had, some leaders in the Treasure Valley in the IT space that have been slow to adopt borderless talent. There are companies in town that have already been bringing in talent remote to get the work done, and those that were rigid around that fact, where they wouldn't look at where the talent was and meet them there, but they wanted them physically in the Treasure Valley, they were at a disadvantage, right? What we're seeing now is a forced adoption because there are borderless talents. We're watching the silver lining of our own leaders in the Treasure Valley going after talent in other parts of the world, other parts of the nation, to bring in the best of breed to really get their projects rolling and really bring in that great thought leadership of people that have done incredible work in other parts of the US. Think of the hotbed of Seattle, think of the Bay. They're able to bring those people in who are still sitting in those places to work for our Treasure Valley organizations. We've seen the inverse too. You asked me what I'm seeing. We're seeing the Bay, Seattle, we're seeing Austin, we're seeing bigger cities now using Boise talent as a hunting ground. They can get our talent less cost and let them still work remote. So we're seeing a war on our talent in about the last 90 days. So it's been a real pivot.
Okay.
Other things we're seeing on my own team, anecdotally, I can see that I've had really seasoned sales reps on my team who are used to going out to see the clients and walk the halls. They're used to maybe meeting up for golf or a glass of wine, and that's not happening right now, or not as regularly. So they've had to reinvent themselves, have to become significant and relevant over Zoom, which sometimes isn't easy if you've never done it before. And your secret sauce or your silver bullet has always been meeting in person and building that face-to-face, breathe the same air relationship. So it's been interesting to watch everybody on my team and the different, where they are in their career, make modifications. So there's some silver linings there too.
Yeah, that's what a powerful insight, especially in that self-reflection of an account executive or a salesperson who's done something the same way for so long, and then having to be open to changing styles virtually, at least in the short run. I've heard the era that we're starting to go into called a couple different things, the new normal or reentry post-COVID. What is your perspective on this particular landscape and what it may look like in the next 3, 6, 12 months?
Okay, good. Well, we've kind of branded it the new next. That
The new
comes from,
next. I like that the most.
yeah, the new next. So our president, Becky Frankiewicz, came up with that. And Jake, as a company of our size, we have a deep and wide research team. So we do a lot of consulting for our clients who want to know if they're a global footprint company, like say a Micron, they may want to know in all their locations worldwide, tell us things about the hiring opportunities, what's changing, what's trending. all the way down to maybe a company like a Blue Cross that's really only has its tentacles in Idaho. So maybe they want to know certain things about what we're seeing in the market with other companies. So we're seeing a lot of interesting data. I'm going to pull up a little bit so I don't misstate anything, but
Yeah, no problem.
yeah. So, with the new Next, when we did a global survey, and this is just last month, 43% of all workers across the globe believe the 9 to 5 is over. They don't want to go back to a 9 to 5 in a brick and mortar for 5 days a week. So that's almost 50% of the world's working population, as an example. 60% of the world's population is still working remote. And it goes cross-generational. As an example, if you think about the Gen Zs, which is 18 to 24-year-olds, they want to go back because that's where they build their colonies, their communities, their friendships, and they're missing out on opportunities to advance their careers by just observing. So they miss it the most. The boomers and the Gen Xers really like the separation. They like home to be home, work to be work. They miss going back to the office, but they would only like to do it in a hybrid fashion a couple times a week and have the flexibility to work from home. Then you have millennials who love what's going down right now. They love being home because they have kids. Lots of them have kids, and this makes it a lot better. I mean, you still have the factor of what do we do with our kids for school? That's still a big, big challenge for companies and people worldwide. But they love the fact that they can kind of nest and be home and really bring value to their kids.
Wow.
Yeah. So
those are compelling stats. I didn't realize that 60, did you say 60%
yeah.
of the world is still working remotely right now?
Yes, they are. Yeah.
That's an incredible number because I guess I just put the blinders on so much and I just think of our little town, our community here in Boise. I drive around, I see folks starting to go back into the store, starting to go back into places. So I guess I'm assuming that they're also going back into their places of work, even though that I've been working remotely during this time as well. But that's 60% is a
ton. Yeah. Yeah, we're, even our own company and that Experis brand that I described on the front of this podcast, we have no plans to go back. We're all dispersed, but we're all in IT. So it was it was easier than the frontline workers, right? Hospitality folks, people in travel, people in food. Yeah, a lot of difference there. And to your point, what you see and what you know in data. So just a couple more notes that may be interesting to your listeners. So job demand from June to July has been increasing. So the last 12 weeks, there's increase in job demand, meaning more openings. There's 9 million open jobs in the US. Of those, 10% are in the IT space, 18% are in operations and logistics. Thinking of, the food, the supply chain, right, as an example. The quit rate, which is a new measurement that has been in our industry for quite a while, but been more of a forefront, is the quit rate, meaning if it's high, that means people like you and me who have great jobs already, we quit because we have another alternative. So the quit rate is going up. When unemployment is high, the quit rate is lower because people don't have an alternative. So that's been tracking and increasing. I wanted to share with your listeners that almost all states in the US are under 10% unemployment, which
Really?
when you think about at our peak, it was 18. Idaho's August unemployment is 4.2. Pre-COVID, it was 3.5. So we're recovering very well in Idaho. Which is great. And the IT folks are still high demand, as I mentioned. There's a war on talent still. It's a little softer, of course, than pre-COVID, but there's still a huge demand because of the borderless talent. So it's opened up our market to across the U.S.
How is it, so we're speaking a lot around skilled labor, obviously, folks that have that background in software and technology, et cetera. I've heard, and, by no means, I'm kind of swimming out into the deep end here. So, throw me a
Yeah.
life preserver, but, I'm also looking out at, jobs of, maybe pick, pack, ship kind of jobs in warehousing, maybe those more temporary flex type roles, or I don't want to say entry level type career, but careers that are in more commoditized. Um, what's that been like? Because I've heard that there's a lot of quitting just because of potential unemployment benefits plus the COVID stimulus that's associated with this, and that organizations are having a hard time staffing those roles as well, at least on a short term or long term basis. Is that founded in any evidence that you see, or have you heard things like that?
Yeah, there has been some challenges, when you cannot return to work and make the same or more. It's been a challenge for people to get people back to work. But I think in general, people want to get to work. There's an identity. There's the essence of who you are is the work and your contributions. So there's still quite a bit of churn in those industries and sectors, and there's a little bit different facts in some of those areas as well. But you do have some good facts.
What advice would you give someone who's been maybe riding the bench for a while, or had to shut down their small business, or is just kind of beaten against the rocks with all the things that have happened in the 6 months? Like, do you any advice? If somebody was to start a new career, maybe what industries would they look in? I mean, what would you have to offer for those folks?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, take a deep breath. This too will pass. When we don't know, but we are getting back to work each week, each month. It's, the unemployment numbers are going down. People are putting people back to work. Companies are hiring. If you are in the Treasure Valley, the Boise area, couldn't be in a better, faster growing city that's getting back to work faster, I think, in a more healthy way. COVID cautious, but I think just, continuing to focus on what is it you do well? What are your 1, 2, 3 core differentiators in your business or your culture or the things you do and deliver to the market, and really focus on those. I've seen companies that have innovated and pivoted. We see it in the food industry, right? People never did to go. They never did curbside service. They never did some of those things. They were doing it temporarily. Now it's probably more of their business model going forward. Um, you know, Innovating, I think, is really critical. Again, being resilient, that shock absorber, figuring out a way to sustain and move forward. There is a lot of opportunity. There are a lot of jobs that have come out of COVID that weren't even positions before, contract tracking, those kinds of things. There's a lot of work out there.
Okay. And so another question I have, sorry, I'm just firing him off here when you're done talking, but I'm just so excited to have a little bit of your time today. Um, for I saw a recent article and it said that, we thought that the Treasure Valley or that Boise was going to be the next Seattle or the next Portland. And I've seen folks say that actually it's probably going to be the next Silicon Valley. What do you feel about that? I mean, being in the technology world, being a recent board member of the Boise Valley Economic Partnership, you got to have your finger on the pulse of this a little bit. Are we growing Seattle, Portland style? Or are we growing Silicon Valley style?
Wow, I have I'm in the thick of all of that. Our teams recruit people to move here. We pick up families, we make significant changes in people's life by giving them great opportunities with new positions. And we've been doing that for years, and in the last 5 years, a ton of that here in Boise. I mean, with some of our larger employers where we are their global staffing partners, we've brought in enormous amounts of people who have trailing spouses and kids, and then their grandparents follow the grandkids. And, there's a ton of growth that I feel like the industry I represent has been instrumental in bringing good talent and people to the Valley. I believe, to answer your question, that we will be growing a lot smarter. and a lot more logically. And I pray that we do, because I think there's some significant challenges in some of these other big markets that were not planned well. Our growth here is enormous. I think we're all watching house prices go up, and they're getting out of reach for first-time home buyers. The supply and demand on the homes, even the supply and demand on jobs. There are, the Bay and Seattle have both made Boise targets for them to hire away our people from our Boise-based companies. So I don't know if it's going to be quite a few years before we even get to the size of an Austin or, a Portland. I don't think we'll be to the size of a Silicon Valley. I think we'll have a lot of thought leaders and, great talent here from the Bay Area, though, because that's the highest in migration city coming into Treasure Valley is the Bay Area.
Well, thanks for that. So as we're getting ready to wrap up here and close out this awesome, like 20, 30 minutes goes by so fast, Duree. It's unbelievable. I loved your thoughts earlier around your mindset, your team's mindset, being resilient. What else would you have to offer folks, once again, from a motivational standpoint, from a positivity standpoint, just so that they can get their mind right as they're attacking this job market and as they're reflecting on new opportunities?
Compassion is really important right now. Understanding what people their journey that they've gone through during this strange 2020 that we've all experienced. Often we look internally, but the person you may be interviewing with, the client you may be talking to, the prospect you might be trying to convert to be your client, or whatever industry you're in, they're going through it too. They may be home struggling with an unemployed spouse. They may be trying to teach school and keep a job and make dinner at night and try to get their kids from going bananas in their house, right? So just be compassionate, be empathetic, understand we are all in this new next, but there's such good harmony and joy on the other side. We'll get there. All of us will get there together. And being resilient, I think, not to continue to beat a word, but, how we respond and how we show our grit and how we show our love for each other is super important. We've got a lot of different dynamics in our society right now that are pulling on us, and, big moves, and, making sure that we're doing thoughtful, meaningful conversations, listening well, and, staying focused on what you want to get done, but be compassionate with who you're talking to, whatever your audience is.
Powerful words to close out this podcast. Duree, thank you so much for coming on. I just want folks to know you have been such a great mentor for me over the years. I can pick up the phone, I call you, I ask you questions. You've certainly, I've gotten to know the Experis organization well over the years as well. Such motivated, inspiring, true professionals out there. So thank you again for being who you are. And thanks again for running such a great arm of a wonderful company. And I look forward to you and I getting together soon and having another chat.
Awesome, Jake. Thank you so much. It was an honor to be on. Appreciate it.